The year is 1663. You are standing in a narrow, timber-framed room in London. Outside, the city is a cacophony of iron wheels on cobblestones and the shouts of street hawkers selling oysters and coal. Inside, it is quiet. The curtains are drawn tight. The air is thick, almost solid, with the smell of dried rosemary and vinegar. In the center of the room, a wealthy merchant lies in a heavy oak bed, sweating under layers of wool blankets. He is in pain. He is afraid. And the man standing next to him is his only hope. This man wears a long velvet robe trimmed with fur. He does not touch the patient. He does not check the man's temperature with a thermometer, because thermometers are not yet used in medicine. Instead, he holds a glass flask up to the candlelight. Inside the flask is the patient's urine. The doctor stares at the amber liquid, swirling it gently, looking for clouds or sediments. He consults a chart of the stars. He speaks in Latin, a language the merchant does not understand. To modern eyes, this scene looks like theater. It looks like performance, not science. We might ask, why is he looking at the stars? Why isn't he measuring blood pressure? Why does he have so much authority when he has so few tools? But this is not theater. This is the highest standard of medical care in the 17th century. This doctor is a licensed physician, a graduate of Oxford or Cambridge. Every gesture he makes, the robe, the Latin, the flask, is part of a complex system of social trust. To understand the history of medicine, we must first unlearn what we know about hospitals and labs. We must step into a world where medicine was not just about biology. It was about balance, tradition, and authority. Welcome to the London Gritty Chronicles. In this series, we are going to explore why medicine looked the way it did for thousands of years. We will look at the herbs, the bloodletting, and the strange rituals of the past. But we will not mock them. Instead, we will use history to sharpen your English. We will learn how to describe systems, how to explain cause and effect, and how to discuss authority and credibility in academic terms. Let's begin with the scene in that bedroom. The man in the velvet robe represents the top of the medical hierarchy. In historical English, we often talk about a hierarchy, which means a system where members are ranked according to relative status or authority. At the very top sat the physician. Notice the capital P. In London during the 1600s, a physician was a scholar. He had spent years at a university reading ancient texts. He studied philosophy, rhetoric, and logic. Surprisingly, he rarely studied the human body by opening it up. Dissection was considered dirty, manual labor, something beneath the dignity of a gentleman. His knowledge came from books, specifically the books of Galen and Hippocrates, ancient Greek figures whose words were treated almost like scripture. This brings us to a key English learning point. When we describe historical figures who are respected because of their education or position, we talk about their authority. Authority is the power or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience. But in an academic context, it also means the power to influence opinion. The physician had medical authority because he knew the ancient texts. He had social authority because he was a gentleman. When you describe this in English, you might say, the physician derived his authority from his university education. Or, Society placed a high value on theoretical knowledge over practical experience. Let's go back to the bedside. The merchant on the bed trusts the physician, not because the physician has cured everyone he has touched, he certainly hasn't, but because the physician looks and sounds like an expert. This is a concept called credibility. Credibility is the quality of being trusted and believed in. The physician's credibility was built on exclusion. Only a small group of men could afford university. Only they could read Latin. By using a language the patient didn't speak, the physician created a barrier. This barrier signaled, "I possess knowledge you do not have." It protected his status. If medicine had been simple and conducted in plain English, anyone could do it. By keeping it complex and exclusive, the physicians maintained their monopoly. You can use the word exclusive to describe a group that restricts who can join. For example, the Royal College of Physicians was an exclusive organization. But what exactly was this physician doing with the urine flask? He was practicing uroscopy. For centuries, the inspection of urine was the primary diagnostic tool. A diagnosis is the identification of the nature of an illness. The physician believed that the urine was a mirror of the body's internal fluids. He was looking for balance. The entire medical system was based on the idea that the body contained 4 fluids, or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health was a state of perfect balance between these 4. Sickness was an imbalance. This theory, known as humoral theory, is the engine of our story. It explains everything that happens next. It explains why they used leeches. It explains why they purged patients with powerful herbs. They weren't trying to kill the bacteria. They didn't know bacteria existed. They were trying to restore balance to the fluids. When you explain historical reasoning, it is important to use neutral language. Instead of saying, "they had a crazy idea," you should say, "the prevailing theory suggested that health depended on fluid balance." Prevailing means current, existing, or most common at a particular time. So, the physician in our scene decides the merchant has an excess of blood. The diagnosis is made. The authority has spoken. But here is the twist. The physician in the velvet robe will not perform the treatment. He will not dirty his hands with a knife. He considers manual labor to be beneath him. He turns to the merchant's wife and writes a prescription in Latin. He instructs her to send for a different kind of healer. A man with sharp tools. A man who smells of old blood and sawdust. A man from the lower class. He orders her to fetch a surgeon. In the modern world, a surgeon is at the top of the medical profession. In the 1600s, he was a tradesman, often ranked alongside barbers and shoemakers. The gap between the physician and the surgeon is one of the great conflicts of medical history. It is a conflict between the head and the hand, between theory and practice. Why did this division exist? How did the man with the knife eventually overtake the man with the book? And what happened when the theories of the ancient Greeks collided with the gritty reality of a London plague? We have established the scene. We have a sick merchant, an arrogant physician, and a theory of invisible fluids. But to understand why the treatment, the actual physical intervention, was so brutal, we have to go deeper into the mind of the 17th century Londoner. We have to look at how they viewed the universe itself. The physician steps back from the bed. He collects his fee, a substantial sum of gold, and prepares to leave. He has done his job. He has identified the imbalance. Now, The bloody work begins. The heavy oak door creaks open again. The atmosphere in the room shifts instantly. The expensive scent of the physician's perfume fades, replaced by something sharper. The smell of stale iron, soap, and sawdust. The man who enters does not wear velvet. He wears a practical leather apron. He does not carry a book. He carries a wooden box filled with blades, bandages, and a brass bowl. This is the barber surgeon. In 1663, if you needed a haircut, you went to this man. If you needed a tooth pulled, you went to this man. And if the physician decided you had too much blood in your veins, this man was the one who held the knife. He approaches the bed with a brisk, businesslike energy. There is no Latin discussion. There is only action. He instructs the merchant to roll up his sleeve. He ties a linen strip called a ligature tight around the merchant's upper arm. The pressure builds. The veins in the forearms swell, turning blue against the pale skin. The surgeon waits for the pulse to thump against the restraint. He opens his box and selects a fleam, or a lancet, a small double-edged blade. With a practiced motion, he snaps the blade into the swollen vein. Dark red blood spurts into the brass bowl. The merchant gasps, turning his head away, but the surgeon watches the flow intently. He is measuring it. He is not just letting blood spill. He is calculating the evacuation. This scene introduces a critical distinction in the history of English work and society: the difference between a profession and a trade. The physician belonged to a profession. A profession is a paid occupation, especially one that involves prolonged training and a formal qualification. In history, this usually meant university study. The surgeon belonged to a trade. A trade is a skilled job, typically one requiring manual skills and special training. The surgeon did not go to Oxford. He learned his craft through an apprenticeship. An apprenticeship is a system of training a new generation of practitioners of a trade or profession with on-the-job training. He started as a boy, sweeping the floor and sharpening razors, watching his master work until his own hands were steady enough to cut. For English learners, notice the word manual. It comes from the Latin word manus, meaning hand. Manual labor is work done with the hands. In the 17th century, manual labor was considered lower status. This is why the physician stood back. To touch the body, to deal with blood and pus, was seen as dirty. It was necessary, but it was not gentlemanly. This social gap was visible on the streets of London. The physician worked in private homes or colleges. The barber-surgeon worked in a shop open to the street. Outside his shop, you would see the famous red and white pole. We still see these today outside barbershops, but the history is gruesome. The red stripe originally represented the bloody bandages, and the white stripe represented the clean ones. The pole itself represented the stick the patient squeezed to make their veins pop out. Back in the bedroom, the brass bowl is filling up. The surgeon taps the merchant's arm, encouraging the flow. Why would anyone agree to this? Why was bloodletting the standard treatment for almost 2,000 years? To describe this without judging, we must look at the internal logic of the time. They believed the body was a hydraulic system. If a pipe is under too much pressure, it might burst. If a river is flooding, you open a sluice gate to lower the water level. The physician believed the merchant's fever was caused by a plethora, an excess of fluid. By removing the blood, they believed they were physically removing the heat and the pressure. When you explain this, use the phrase, "The logic behind the practice was..." This allows you to explain the reasoning without saying it was correct. For example, the logic behind bloodletting was to restore the balance of the humors. Another useful word is alleviate. To alleviate means to make suffering, deficiency, or a problem less severe. The surgeon believed he was alleviating the fever. And surprisingly, the merchant might actually feel better. The loss of blood causes a drop in blood pressure. The pounding headache fades. A wave of calm, really the onset of shock, washes over him. To the observer, this looked like a cure. The patient has calmed down. The fever seems to have broken. The treatment appears to be a success. This reinforces the social trust we mentioned in Part 1. The patient expects the treatment to work. The physician orders it. The surgeon performs it. The body reacts. The system confirms itself. The surgeon unties the ligature. He places a small pad of lint over the cut and binds it tight. He wipes his blade on a cloth. He checks the blood in the bowl, perhaps noting its color or thickness, before discarding it. He is paid, but he receives a fraction of what the physician earned. He packs his box and leaves. The room is quiet again. The merchant is pale, weak, and resting. But the treatment is not over. The physician's prescription included more than just bleeding. The humors must be purified further. We have dealt with the fluids. Now we must deal with the miasma, the bad air, and the internal corruption. The merchant's wife takes the second piece of paper the physician left. She calls for a servant to run to the market, to a shop that smells not of blood, but of spices, dried roots, and exotic powders. She is sending for the apothecary. If the physician is the head, and the surgeon is the hand, the apothecary is the storehouse. He is the keeper of the ingredients. And the substances he sells are about to connect our London bedroom to a vast global trade network of plants, minerals, and dubious cures. The servant runs through the crowded streets, clutching the physician's paper. He arrives at a shop with a different kind of sign, often a pestle and mortar, or perhaps a stuffed alligator hanging in the window. He pushes the door open, and a wave of scents hits him. Cinnamon, dried rhubarb, opium, and crushed beetles. This is the domain of the apothecary. If the physician was the architect of the cure, and the surgeon was the builder, the apothecary was the supplier of materials. In modern English, we might call him a pharmacist, but in the 17th century, he was much more. He was a merchant of secrets. The servant hands the prescription to the man behind the counter. The apothecary reads the Latin instructions. He nods. He turns to his shelves, which are lined with blue and white ceramic jars. He begins to pull down ingredients. This moment reveals a fascinating aspect of historical medicine, the belief in complexity. The physician did not prescribe just one herb. He prescribed a compound. A compound is a mixture of two or more separate elements. The belief was that if one ingredient missed the disease, another one might hit it. Some famous remedies, like theriac, contained over 60 different ingredients, including viper flesh and roasted copper. The apothecary places the dried roots and leaves into a stone mortar. He grinds them with a heavy pestle. The rhythm of the grinding, clack, crunch, grind, was the heartbeat of medical treatment. For English learners, the word remedy is essential here. A remedy is a medicine or treatment for a disease or injury. You might say, the apothecary prepared a complex remedy for the fever. Another useful word is potent. Potent means having great power, influence, or effect. The mixture was incredibly potent. But why were these remedies so complex? Why include rare spices from the other side of the world? This connects biology to society. In the 1600s, people believed that if a medicine was rare, expensive, and difficult to obtain, it must be powerful. The exotic nature of the ingredients added to the patient's trust. Nutmeg from the Banda Islands, opium from Turkey, sugar from the Caribbean, these were status symbols. Swallowing them was an act of wealth. The medicine was effective, partly because it was expensive. Here lies a hidden conflict. In London, the physicians were constantly fighting the apothecaries. Why? Because apothecaries often gave medical advice for free to sell their drugs. They were the general practitioners for the poor. The physicians tried to stop them, to protect their own authority. They wanted to keep the hierarchy strict. Physicians think, surgeons cut, apothecaries mix. But the lines were blurring. The servant rushes back to the house. The merchant is still weak from the bloodletting. He is propped up on pillows. His wife unstopped the vial. The smell is pungent, sharp and biting. He drinks it. Within 20 minutes, the room is in chaos. The merchant is vomiting. He is rushing to the chamber pot with diarrhea. To a modern observer, this looks like a disaster. We would say, he is having a terrible reaction. We would say the medicine is poisoning him. But in 1663, the physician and the family nod in approval. They do not see this as a side effect. They see it as the intended effect. This is a crucial concept for understanding historical descriptions. They wanted a purgative. To purge means to rid someone of an unwanted quality, condition, or feeling. In medicine, it meant physically expelling the bad humors from the body. If the patient didn't vomit, the medicine was considered weak. If they were violently ill, the medicine was working. The logic was consistent. The bloodletting removed the pressure. The purgative removed the corruption. The body was being emptied out to be cleaned. Use the word intervention to describe this.
An intervention is the action of becoming intentionally involved in a difficult situation to improve it. The medical intervention was harsh and physically draining.
The merchant lies back, exhausted. He is pale, trembling, and empty. He has been bled. He has been purged. He is dehydrated. By modern standards, he is in shock. But his family believes he has received the best care money can buy. The physician used his authority. The surgeon used his skill. The apothecary used his potent supply. The social ritual of medicine is complete. Trust has been maintained. But while this private drama plays out in a wealthy bedroom, a different kind of drama is unfolding on the docks of London. A ship has just arrived from Amsterdam. It is carrying bales of cotton. And inside those bales, something is moving. Something that does not care about university degrees, Latin prescriptions, or social status. The merchant's immune system is now shattered by the cure. He is vulnerable, and the timing could not be worse. We have seen the system working as it was designed. Now, we are going to see what happens when that system faces a threat it cannot bleed or purge away. We are about to witness the arrival of the Great Plague. The ship from Amsterdam docks quietly. It is late in the year, 1664. The sky is grey, and the River Thames is a soup of mud and refuse. The dock workers heave the bales of cotton onto the wet stones. They are tired. They do not notice the small, dark shapes scurrying from the ropes to the wood of the pier. They do not feel the tiny bite of a flea. This is the accidental twist. While the physician, the surgeon, and the apothecary were busy treating the merchant's internal fluids, an external enemy has arrived. This enemy does not care about humors. It does not care about balance. It is a biological machine designed to replicate. In history, we often see a clash between two ways of thinking about disease. The first is physiological. Illness comes from inside, from an imbalance. That is what we saw in the bedroom. The second is ontological. Illness is a thing, an entity, an invader from the outside. The medical system of London was built entirely around the first idea. They were looking at the patient, not the environment. They were prepared for a riot of the body, not an invasion of the city. This brings us to a critical English term: susceptible. To be susceptible means likely to be influenced or harmed by a particular thing. Because our merchant has been bled and purged, his body is weak. He is now highly susceptible to infection. Another key word is transmission. Transmission is the action or process of transmitting something, or the state of being transmitted. In this case, we are talking about the transmission of disease. But here is the tragedy. The people of London did not understand transmission the way we do. They did not know about bacteria or viruses. They believed in miasma. Miasma is a word you will see often in history books. It comes from the Greek word for pollution. It means a cloud of bad air. They believed that rotting matter, swamps, and filth created a poisonous vapor. If you breathed it in, your humors would go out of balance. So, when the first dock workers fell sick with high fevers and strange black swellings, the authorities did not look at the rats. They looked at the sky. They looked at the wind. They sniffed the air. The physician we met in part 1 would say, "The air is corrupt." His solution? Bonfires. As the death toll rises in the poor district of St. Giles, the city orders huge fires to be lit in the streets. They burn coal, pitch, and frankincense. The idea was to purify the air. Imagine the scene. A city choking on smoke to cure a disease caused by a flea bite. This is a perfect example of how theory dictates action. If you believe the problem is air, you treat the air. If you believe the problem is blood, you treat the blood. But the disease, the Great Plague, moves faster than the theory. It jumps from the docks to the crowded parishes. It enters the houses of the poor, where families sleep 5 to a bed. Now, the social trust begins to fracture. The wealthy merchant in his oak bed hears the church bells ringing. Not the happy bells of a wedding, but the slow, heavy toll of a funeral. Clang, clang. It happens every hour, then every 30 minutes. He looks to his physician for reassurance, but the physician is packing his bags. This is one of the most shocking facts of the 1665 plague. The College of Physicians, the guardians of public health, largely abandoned the city. They argued that their duty was to survive so they could preserve the knowledge for the future. They fled to the countryside, leaving the city to the surgeons, the apothecaries, and the poor. When you describe this, you might use the phrase, the breakdown of social order, or the flight of the elite. To flee, past tense, fled, means to run away from a place or situation of danger. The physicians fled the city, leaving the population vulnerable. Who was left in charge? The authorities had to create a new system of control. They couldn't cure the disease, so they tried to imprison it. They appointed searchers of the dead. These were not doctors. They were poor, elderly women, often illiterate, paid pennies to enter infected houses and examine the corpses. If they found the telltale tokens, the purple or black spots, they reported it. And then came the shutting up. If a house was infected, the authorities painted a red cross on the door. They wrote, "Lord have mercy upon us," above it. And then they nailed the door shut from the outside. The family inside was trapped. The sick and the healthy were locked together in the dark. A watchman stood guard outside to ensure no one left. This was not a medical treatment. It was a police action. The word for this is quarantine. It comes from the Italian word quaranta, meaning 40. Originally, ships had to wait 40 days before docking. In London, it became a death sentence for the household. The merchant, recovering from his bloodletting, is now terrified. He is not afraid of his humors anymore. He is afraid of the Red Cross. He is afraid of the watchman. The authority that once comforted him, the velvet robe, the Latin words, has vanished. The biology of the plague, the germ, has forced a change in the society, the law. The city is no longer a place of trade. It is a prison. And in this prison, people turn to desperate measures. Since the official medicine has failed and the official doctors have fled, the people turn to the unofficial. They turn to magic. They turn to tobacco. In the next part, we will see how the failure of authority led to a boom in remedies that were even stranger than bloodletting. And we will meet the only people who stayed behind to fight the invisible enemy. The streets of London are no longer filled with the roar of trade. They are filled with a terrifying silence, broken only by the sound of heavy wooden wheels. And the cry, "Bring out your dead!" Our merchant, weak from his medical treatments, watches from his window. The wealthy neighbors have fled. The physicians have gone to their country estates. The king has moved the court to Oxford. The city has been abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect it. But nature abhors a vacuum. When the official authority leaves, a new kind of authority rushes in to fill the gap. Down on the street corner, a man stands on a wooden crate. He is shouting. He holds up a bottle of green liquid. He claims it is an infallible cure. He says it contains powdered unicorn horn and pearls. He promises it will stop the Black Death in its tracks. This man is a charlatan. A charlatan is a person falsely claiming to have a special knowledge or skill, a fraud. In historical English, we also call them quacks. This word comes from the Dutch word quacksalver, meaning someone who quacks about their salves, ointments. Why did people listen to him? Why did the poor spend their last pennies on dried toads or plague water? To understand this, we must look at the emotion of desperation. Desperation is a state of despair, typically one that results in rash or extreme behavior. When the official system fails, when the university doctor runs away, the desperate patient looks for any hope. The charlatan sells certainty in a time of chaos. He uses the language of authority. He might wear a fake robe or use fake Latin, but his goal is to exploit the fear. To exploit means to make full use of and derive benefit from a resource, often unfairly. The charlatans exploited the panic of the citizens. But not all the new remedies were scams. Some were just surprising. Imagine a schoolroom in the town of Eton, just outside London. It is morning. The boys are sitting at their desks, but they are not holding pens. They are not reading grammar books. They are holding clay pipes, and the room is filled with smoke. The schoolmaster is walking between the desks with a whip. If a boy stops smoking, he gets hit. This is a true historical detail. In 1665, tobacco was considered a powerful preventative. A preventative is a medicine or treatment designed to keep something undesirable, such as illness or harm, from occurring. Remember the theory of miasma? They believed the plague was in the air. Therefore, they believed that strong smells, like tobacco smoke, could disinfect the air. To them, smoking was not a vice. It was a medical duty. It was a way to fumigate the lungs. When you describe this, avoid saying they were stupid to smoke. Instead, say, they operated under the belief that smoke could neutralize the airborne poison. While the charlatans shouted and the schoolboys smoked, a quiet shift was happening in the medical hierarchy. Remember the apothecaries? The shopkeepers who mixed the drugs? Many of them stayed. While the famous physicians of the Royal College were safe in the countryside, writing letters about the disease, the apothecaries and the surgeons were walking into the infected houses. They were lancing the buboes, the swellings. They were mixing the herbs. They were dying alongside their patients. This changed the social trust forever. The people of London saw who abandoned them and who stayed. The status of the physician was based on ancient books. The status of the apothecary was now being forged in the fire of the plague. The apothecaries began to do something illegal. They began to diagnose. They didn't just mix the prescription, they decided what the patient needed. They stepped into the role of the doctor. This is a great example of how a crisis can disrupt a hierarchy. The rigid class system broke down because the biology of the virus didn't respect it. The need for survival outweighed the need for tradition. As the summer of 1665 turned into autumn, the death toll reached its peak. 7,000 people died in a single week. The churchyards were full. They began digging plague pits, mass graves where bodies were stacked like firewood. Our merchant is still alive, but he is running out of food. He is running out of hope. The preventatives haven't worked. The infallible cures were lies. The tobacco smoke hasn't cleared the air. It just masks the smell of death. The city is a tinderbox. It is dry, crowded, and desperate. The wooden houses are packed together, leaning over the narrow streets. The wind is picking up. The plague has killed the people. But to kill the plague, London needs something more than herbs. It needs a different kind of purification. In the next part, the heat is going to rise. The cure for the city will come not from a doctor's bag, but from a baker's oven. We are about to witness the Great Fire, and we will see how it sterilized the city in a way no surgeon ever could. It is 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, September 2nd, 1666. The city is asleep. In a small bakery on Pudding Lane, the oven is still warm. The baker, Thomas Fariner, has gone to bed, believing the fire is out. But deep inside a pile of brushwood near the oven, a single ember glows. It breathes in the oxygen. It grows. The spark snaps. The wood catches, and within minutes the bakery is an inferno. This is the moment the medicine changed. For a year, the physicians tried to cure the city with herbs. The authorities tried to cure it with quarantine. But the cure that actually worked was not prescribed by a doctor. It was an accident. The fire jumps from the bakery to the neighboring house. The summer has been hot and dry. The wooden buildings are like kindling. A strong east wind picks up the flames and drives them toward the heart of the city. Our merchant wakes up to a sound like thunder. He looks out the window. The sky is not grey anymore. It is a terrifying, pulsing orange. The air is so hot it singes his eyebrows. He does not grab his gold. He grabs his life. He runs. For 4 days, the Great Fire of London consumes everything in its path. It destroys 13,000 houses. It melts the lead roof of St. Paul's Cathedral, sending a river of liquid metal flowing down the street. It burns the Royal College of Physicians. It burns the apothecaries' shops. It burns the rats in the walls and the fleas in the floorboards. This event is what we call an inadvertent solution. Inadvertent means not resulting from or achieved through deliberate planning. The fire was an inadvertent public health measure. No one started the fire to kill the plague, but that is exactly what it did. The fire acted as a massive sterilization. To sterilize means to make something free from bacteria or other living microorganisms. By burning the filthy, cramped wooden housing, the fire destroyed the habitat of the black rat. It burned the straw where the fleas laid their eggs. It cauterized the wound of the city. When you describe this, you can use the word eradicate. To eradicate means to destroy completely, to put an end to. The fire helped to eradicate the conditions that allowed the plague to thrive. The merchant stands on the south bank of the river, watching his home turn to ash. He has lost his property. He has lost his business. But he is alive. And strangely, the air feels cleaner. The smell of rot is gone, replaced by the smell of charcoal. This destruction forced a total reset of the city's infrastructure. Infrastructure refers to the basic physical and organizational structures and facilities, for example, buildings, roads, power supplies, needed for the operation of a society. Before the fire, London was a medieval maze. After the fire, it had to be reimagined. But the fire did not just burn buildings, it burned books. Remember the library of the physician, the ancient texts of Galen and Hippocrates. Many of those books were housed in the Royal College, which was now a smoking ruin. The symbols of authority were gone. The old robes were ash. The old diplomas were dust. This created a unique opportunity for new ideas. When the physical structures of tradition are destroyed, the mental structures often crumble too. The physicians could no longer just point to a library and say, "It is written." The library wasn't there. They had to look at the world with their own eyes. This marks the beginning of a shift from dogma to empiricism. Dogma is a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true. Empiricism is the theory that all knowledge is derived from sense experience. The fire cleared the ground for a new kind of London. The King, Charles II, issued a decree. The new houses would be built of brick and stone, not wood. The streets would be wider. The city would be designed for airflow and hygiene. But what about the medicine? The merchant is still sick, weak from the stress and the smoke. He needs help. But the old doctors are in disarray. Into this vacuum steps a new generation of thinkers. Men who are not afraid to get their hands dirty. Men who believe that, instead of reading about the body, they should measure it. They should weigh it. They should pump it. One of these men is named William Harvey. He has a radical idea about blood, the very fluid the surgeons were draining into bowls. He says the blood is not a stationary pool that needs to be balanced. He says it is a river. He says it circulates. This idea is dangerous. It contradicts 2,000 years of tradition. It suggests the body is not a garden to be tended, but a machine to be engineered. As the smoke clears over London, a new kind of science is rising from the ashes. It is colder. It is more precise. And it is about to change how our merchant, and everyone else, sees their own heart. The smoke over London has finally cleared. The year is now 1667. The city is a vast construction site. Scaffolding climbs the charred walls of St. Paul's. The streets are being widened, paved with stone and lined with brick houses. The chaos of the plague and the fire has given way to a new obsession. Order. Our merchant has survived. He is living in a temporary wooden house outside the city walls. He is still weak, but he hears rumors of a different kind of gathering. Not a religious meeting, and not a guild meeting. He hears about a group of men who meet at Gresham College. They call themselves the Royal Society. Their motto is nullius in verba, which translates to, take nobody's word for it. This is the birth of modern science. And inside their meeting room, a man named Richard Lower is about to do something that makes the old uroscopy look like child's play. He is not holding a urine flask. He is holding a silver tube and a knife, and on the table there is a sheep. This scene is critical because it marks the shift from observation to experimentation. Observation is the action or process of observing something or someone carefully or in order to gain information. The old physicians observed. They looked at the stars, they looked at the urine. But experimentation is different. An experiment is a scientific procedure undertaken to make a discovery, test a hypothesis, or demonstrate a known fact. Richard Lower isn't just looking at the sheep. He is manipulating it. He connects the silver tube from the artery of the sheep to the vein of a man. Yes, a human man. A somewhat eccentric volunteer named Arthur Koga. The theory is wild. If they can transfer blood, maybe they can transfer personality. Maybe the gentle nature of the sheep will cure the madness of the man. This is the first transfusion. To transfuse means to transfer, blood or other fluid, into the circulatory system of a person or animal. The experiment is grotesque, messy, and dangerous, but it is driven by a revolutionary idea. The body is a machine. For 2,000 years, doctors thought the body was a garden of humors. Now, thanks to the late William Harvey, they know the heart is a pump. They know the veins are pipes. They know the valves are gates. If the body is a machine, then the doctor is not a gardener. He is a mechanic. When you describe this shift, use the word mechanism. A mechanism is a system of parts working together in a machine, a piece of machinery. The doctors began to view the heart as a hydraulic mechanism. This new view completely challenges the authority of the old physician. Remember the man in the velvet robe? He relied on ancient books. But the Royal Society relies on evidence. Evidence is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. If the experiment fails, if Arthur Koga dies or doesn't change, then the theory is wrong. It doesn't matter what the ancient books say. This is a terrifying thought for the old establishment. It means that a 25-year-old experimenter with a knife can prove a 60-year-old professor wrong. The hierarchy of age and status is threatened by the hierarchy of facts. Arthur Koga survives the transfusion, likely because only a small amount was transferred. The Royal Society cheers. They write it down in their journal. They publish it. This introduces the concept of peer review, or at least its ancestor. They share their findings so others can attack them or verify them. To verify means to make sure or demonstrate that something is true, accurate, or justified. But here is the irony. While this science is brilliant, it is also brutal. The Enlightenment is beginning, but it is not gentle. It is cold. It treats the body like an object. Our merchant hears about these experiments and is horrified. A sheep's blood in a man? It sounds against God. It sounds like witchcraft. The public trust in this new science is shaky. They saw the doctors flee the plague. Now they see them sewing tubes into animals. The gap between the elite science and the common people is widening. The Royal Society is discussing gravity and circulation, but the people on the street are still buying unicorn horn from the charlatans. This brings us to a useful English phrase, skepticism. Skepticism is a skeptical attitude, doubt as to the truth of something. The public was skeptical of the new science. The scientists were skeptical of the old traditions. The public viewed the new experiments with deep skepticism. But there is one thing the new science cannot ignore: the plague. The fire killed the rats, but the disease is still out there, lurking in the corners of Europe. And the new mechanics of medicine have a question to answer. If the body is a machine and the heart is a pump, then what is the germ? They can't see it yet. They have telescopes to look at the stars, but they don't have good microscopes to look at the drop of water. They are missing the final piece of the puzzle. They have the pump, the heart. They have the pipes, the veins, but they don't know what is clogging the system. The merchant, meanwhile, is rebuilding his business. He is drinking coffee now, a new, trendy beverage from the East that promises to sharpen the wit. Coffee houses are springing up all over the new London. They are places of news, debate, and sedition. And in one of these coffee houses, a new word is being whispered. A word that will eventually destroy the idea of humours forever. It is the idea of contagion as a living thing. But before we get there, we have to deal with the social fallout of this new medical authority. The physician is losing power, the surgeon is gaining respect, and the apothecary is becoming rich. The old hierarchy is collapsing. The gentleman doctor is dying out, replaced by the professional physician. In the next part, we will see how this new professionalism changed the way you, the patient, interact with the doctor. We will move from the bedroom of the 1600s to the clinic of the 1700s. We will see the birth of the hospital as we know it, and we will learn why bedside manner became a performance of its own. The year is 1725. The wooden scaffolding has long since come down. London has been rebuilt in brick and stone. The narrow, twisting alleys of the medieval city have been replaced, at least in the wealthy districts, by wide squares and elegant townhouses. A merchant from the 1660s is gone. He lived a long life, rebuilt his fortune, and passed it on. We are now following his grandson, Thomas. Thomas is a gentleman. He wears a powdered wig, a silk coat, and carries a cane. But he is not at home. He is walking through the iron gates of a new kind of building. It is large, imposing, and smells of lye soap and sickness. This is the hospital. In the previous century, the hospital was a religious place, a place for hospitality and shelter for the poor. Now, in the 18th century, it is becoming a medical institution. An institution is an organization founded for a religious, educational, social, or similar purpose. In this context, it is a place where medicine is organized, standardized, and dispensed on a mass scale. Thomas is not here as a patient. Wealthy people are still treated at home. He is here as a governor, a donor. He pays money to support the hospital. In exchange, he gets the right to recommend poor people for admission. This reveals a stark truth about Georgian medicine. The poor were the raw material for medical knowledge. Inside the ward, there are rows of beds. A ward is a separate room in a hospital, typically one allocated to a particular type of patient. In 1725, the ward is a theater. Thomas watches as a famous physician leads a group of students from bed to bed. This is called grand rounds. The physician stops at a patient, a young chimney sweep with a terrible cough. He does not check the stars. He does not ask about the boy's soul. He asks about the symptoms. A symptom is a physical or mental feature that is regarded as indicating a condition of disease. The patient presented with symptoms of fever and a chronic cough. The physician listens to the boy's chest. He taps on it. He is looking for patterns. He is not treating the boy as a unique balance of humors anymore. He is treating the disease as a specific entity that attacks the body. He is classifying it, just as a botanist classifies plants. This is the influence of Thomas Sydenham, known as the English Hippocrates. He taught that diseases were distinct species. This was a huge shift. For English learners, this brings us to the difference between acute and chronic. An acute illness is severe and sudden in onset. The plague was an acute infection. A chronic illness is long developing and persists over a long period. The sweep suffered from chronic lung disease. The physician in the ward speaks in a loud, confident voice. He uses the patient to teach the students. The patient often does not speak. He is a case study. This is the beginning of clinical detachment. Clinical means relating to the observation and treatment of actual patients rather than theoretical or laboratory studies. Detachment is the state of being objective or aloof. The doctor must be detached to see the facts. Thomas, the wealthy governor, feels a mix of pride and revulsion. He is proud to support this charity. Charity is the voluntary giving of help, typically in the form of money, to those in need. But he is repulsed by the smell. The hospital is crowded. The windows are often closed to keep out the bad air. They still believe in miasma. Ironically, by gathering so many sick people in one place, the hospital becomes a breeding ground for infection. They call it hospital fever, typhus. You might go in with a broken leg and die of a fever. This creates a paradox. The hospital is the center of medical learning, but it is also a center of medical danger. As Thomas leaves the ward, he sees something that stops him cold. A woman is being carried in. She is not coughing. She has small red spots covering her face. Smallpox. In the 18th century, smallpox was the new terror. It replaced the plague as the great killer. It killed 1 in 3 victims and left the survivors scarred or blind. The Red Plague was an equalizer. It killed Queen Mary II just as easily as it killed a beggar. But here is where the story takes a global turn. While the London physicians are busy classifying diseases in their new hospitals, a woman named Lady Mary Wortley Montagu is returning from Turkey. She is an aristocrat, a writer, and a rebel. And she has seen something in the harems of Constantinople that the Oxford graduates have never dreamed of. She has seen the women taking a small amount of pus from a smallpox victim and scratching it into the skin of a healthy person. They call it engrafting. We call it inoculation. Inoculation is the action of inoculating or of being inoculated. Vaccination. It involves introducing an infective agent into an organism to stimulate the immune system. The London doctors are skeptical. They say, why would you infect someone on purpose? It goes against the ancient rule, do no harm. It sounds like madness. It sounds like the work of ignorant women in the East. But Lady Mary is fierce. She has her own daughter inoculated in front of the royal court. She challenges the medical authority with a simple, undeniable fact. It works. This sets the stage for the biggest battle of 18th century medicine. It is not man versus disease. It is tradition versus innovation. It is the establishment versus the outsider. Our merchant's grandson, Thomas, is terrified of smallpox. He has to make a choice. Does he trust the conservative physicians who bleed and purge? Or does he trust this new, foreign practice, advocated by a woman? The social trust we talked about in Part 1 is being tested again. Who has the authority now? The man with the degree, or the person with the results? In the next part, we will see how this battle plays out. We will meet the man who took this idea and transformed it into the greatest medical savior in history, Edward Jenner. We will see the birth of the first true vaccine. We will learn how medicine finally moved from managing symptoms to prevention death. The noise of London fades. We are leaving the crowded, smoke-filled coffee houses and the stinking hospital wards. We are travelling west to the green, rolling hills of Gloucestershire. The year is 1796. In a small village called Berkeley, there is a country doctor. He is not famous. He does not wear a velvet robe. He wears a sturdy tweed coat and muddy boots. His name is Edward Jenner. Jenner is a man who listens, and for years he has been listening to the local milkmaids, the women who milk the cows. They have a saying in the countryside: if you have the cowpox, you will never have the smallpox. Cowpox is a mild disease. It causes blisters on the udders of cows and on the hands of the milkmaids, but it does not kill. It does not scar the face. It is an annoyance, not a plague. Jenner looks at the hands of a milkmaid named Sarah Nelms. She has a fresh cowpox blister on her hand. She caught it from a cow named Blossom. Jenner has an idea. It is a dangerous, radical idea. It connects the barnyard to the clinic in a way no one has ever done before. He calls for the gardener's son, an 8-year-old boy named James Phipps. This is the moment where medical history pivots. It is also a moment that would be ethically impossible today. Jenner takes a lancet, the same tool the surgeons used for bloodletting. He scratches the fluid from the milkmaid's cowpox blister into the arm of the healthy boy. James gets a little sick. He has a mild fever for a few days. Then he recovers. But the experiment is not over. 6 weeks later, Jenner does the unthinkable. He takes live smallpox matter, the deadly virus that killed queens and beggars alike, and he injects it into the boy. He waits. The boy's parents wait. Nothing happens. No fever, no spots, no death. The boy is safe. The cowpox has acted as a shield. This introduces one of the most important words in medicine and in English: immunity. Immunity is the ability of an organism to resist a particular infection or toxin. Before this moment, people thought immunity was something God gave you, or something you got only after surviving a terrible illness. Jenner proved you could create it. He calls this new process vaccination. The word comes from the Latin vacca, meaning cow. Quite literally, vaccination means cowing. When you describe this, use the word breakthrough. A breakthrough is a sudden, dramatic, and important discovery or development. Jenner's experiment was a major medical breakthrough. Another key term is resistance. Resistance is the refusal to accept or comply with something. In biology, it means the body refuses to accept the disease. But in society, it means the people refused to accept the cure. You might think the world cheered for Jenner. They did not. When Jenner sent his paper to the Royal Society, the same group that transfused sheep blood, they rejected it. They told him not to risk his reputation on something so agricultural. The public was even more hostile. The church said it was abominable to mix the blood of a beast with the blood of a man. They called it a violation of God's law. Cartoonists drew terrifying pictures of people getting vaccinated and then sprouting cow heads, horns, and tails. The fear was visceral. This is a great example of controversy. Controversy is a state of prolonged public disagreement or heated discussion. The introduction of the vaccine was surrounded by intense controversy. But the results were undeniable. Smallpox was a monster, and vaccination was the only weapon that killed it. Slowly, the fear of the cow faded, replaced by the fear of the pox. The British government eventually banned the older, dangerous inoculation, using smallpox, and made vaccination free for the poor. Jenner became a hero, not because he was a genius theorist like the ancient Greeks, but because he was an empiricist. He observed a pattern in nature, the milkmaids, and tested it. He didn't care why it worked. He only cared that it worked. This changed the entire goal of medicine. For thousands of years, the goal was treatment or management. The doctor arrived after you got sick. He tried to balance your humors. He tried to bleed out the fever. Now the goal was prevention. Prevention is the action of stopping something from happening or arising. The focus of medicine shifted from treatment to prevention. We have now traveled from the mystic physician looking at stars to the country doctor looking at cows. We have moved from managing the body's fluids to training the body's defenses. But there is still one massive, invisible hole in our understanding. Jenner knew that the cowpox matter protected the boy, but he didn't know what was in the matter. He couldn't see the virus. He didn't know what a virus was. As the 19th century begins, the cities are getting bigger. The Industrial Revolution is pumping smoke into the sky. The hospitals are becoming factories of death, full of gangrene and infection. The surgeons are faster than ever, but their patients are still dying of hospital fever. The final step in our journey requires us to look at the smallest thing imaginable. We need to find the germ. In the final part of our series, we will meet the men who finally saw the invisible enemy. We will see how a French chemist and a Scottish surgeon united to create the modern world of sterile medicine. And we will learn how the neutral academic tone we practice today was built on the hard-won facts of the past. The year is 1865. We are in Glasgow, Scotland. The industrial city is shrouded in smog, and the hospital wards are full of men with crushed limbs from the factories and shipyards. A surgeon named Joseph Lister walks through the ward. He is troubled. He is a brilliant surgeon. He can amputate a leg in under a minute. But he knows that half of his amputation patients will die within a week. They will not die from the surgery itself. They will die from ward fever. Their wounds will turn red, then purple, then black. They will smell of rotting meat. The doctors call it hospital gangrene. They still believe it is caused by bad air, miasma. They open the windows to let the bad air out, but the patients keep dying. Lister is looking for a new kind of authority. He finds it not in a medical book, but in a chemistry paper written by a Frenchman named Louis Pasteur. Pasteur was not a doctor. He was a chemist studying why wine went sour. He discovered that the souring was not a chemical accident, but the work of tiny, living things. He called them microorganisms, or germs. Lister has a revelation. If germs turn wine sour, maybe they turn wounds sour. Maybe the enemy is not in the air. Maybe it is on his hands. Maybe it is on his knife. This is the birth of germ theory. Germ theory is the theory that certain diseases are caused by the invasion of the body by microorganisms. It is the opposite of the humoral theory we started with. The humoral theory said the problem was internal balance. Germ theory says the problem is external invasion. Lister decides to build a chemical barrier. He chooses carbolic acid, a strong chemical used to deodorize sewage. He doesn't just wash the wound, he sprays the air. He soaks his instruments. He washes his hands until the skin cracks. The other surgeons laugh at him. They say the spray makes the room smell. They say it slows down the surgery. Remember, in the old hierarchy, speed was status. A fast surgeon was a good surgeon. Lister is slow. He is meticulous. Meticulous means showing great attention to detail, very careful and precise. Lister was meticulous in his sterilization procedures. But then the numbers come in. In Lister's ward, the death rate drops from 45% to 15%. The gangrene disappears. The wounds heal cleanly. The evidence is overwhelming. But the authority fights back. The older doctors refuse to believe that invisible beasts are killing their patients. To admit this would be to admit that they were the killers, that their unwashed hands carried death from patient to patient. It takes a generation for the old guard to retire, but eventually the sterile environment becomes the new standard. Sterile means free from bacteria or other living microorganisms, totally clean. The operating theater must be kept sterile. By the end of the 19th century, the transformation is complete. The doctor is no longer a philosopher in a velvet robe. He is a scientist in a white coat. The white coat is not for fashion. It is to show dirt. It is a symbol of cleanliness. We have traveled from 1663 to 1900. We have seen how medicine evolved from a system of social trust and tradition into a system of biological science. We started with the physician looking at the stars. We moved to the surgeon cutting the vein. We saw the apothecary mixing the herbs. We watched the community survive the plague and the fire. And finally, we saw the scientist kill the invisible germ. Throughout this journey, we have used history to learn English. We have learned how to describe systems, hierarchy, infrastructure. We have learned how to describe cause and effect, correlation, causation. And most importantly, we have learned how to speak about the past with a neutral academic tone. When you describe history, you do not need to judge it. You do not need to say, they were stupid for bleeding people. You can say, they operated under a different theoretical framework. You can say, their practices were consistent with their understanding of the world. This is the power of academic English. It allows you to understand the why behind the what. The history of medicine is not just a story of cures. It is a story of authority. It is a story of how we decide who to trust. Once we trusted the man with the oldest book. Now we trust the woman with the strongest evidence. As you continue your English learning journey, remember the lessons of London. Look for the hidden logic in every text. Ask questions about authority and evidence, and never be afraid to challenge the prevailing theory if you have the facts to back it up. The urine flask is gone. The leeches are gone, mostly. But the search for truth and the right words to describe it continues. This is the London Gritty Chronicles. Class is dismissed.